This conference will now be recorded.
So hello and welcome to this webinar number 14 presented by the Excel Basement Private Limited. I am Rahim Zulfiqar and today in this webinar we will be discussing about how to get started with data analysis expressions. And DAX, which we call data analysis expressions, is a language which is used both in Microsoft Power BI and Microsoft Excel Power Pivot as well. So in this webinar, I will be telling you about what are the learning resources when you start writing or learning the data analysis expressions. What are the different websites you can go through? What are the different courses you can adopt and learn? And what are different kind of structures and important terms and concepts you need to learn before you formally apply the data analysis expression in Microsoft Excel Power Pivot or Microsoft Power BI. So in this webinar, my main focus will remain to guide you as a mentor about how to get started with the data analysis expressions. Okay, so let's get started. Quickly, I will give my introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Certified Analytics and Data Specialist, also a few certification from the Microsoft, and I'm the Microsoft Certified Trainer, MS Office Specialist in Excel 13 and 16, and probably will going for the 2019 in the coming days. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Excel Basement Private Limited. I'm associated with the industry for the last 7 years for the Excel and the Power BI as well. So this was my quick introduction. You can add me on LinkedIn if you want to. Let's quickly start the session now. So in this session, as I told you that I will be telling you about how you get started with the DAX. And there is a meme in this slide is that boss is asking that did Power BI work? And the employee says, well, yes, but actually no. So it happens almost most of the times with the users that uh, they import the data and they just start making the dashboards out of it, but at the back end if there are no analysis has done, so your dashboards will be very simple. So for doing the advanced analytics, just like predictive analytics, sentiment analysis, variance analysis, you need a lot of DAX to be written either in the Power Pivot interface within the Excel or in the Power BI, so that your report should work and your dashboard should tell you about the story, and you can take the decisions. So without simple dashboards, without any calculations or the analysis, your dashboard will actually does not work. And I will show you a couple of examples later on in this webinar. Okay, so first I will show you about the learning resources, because most of the users ask me on WhatsApp and Facebook and LinkedIn that how we can start learning the data analysis expression language. So the first and foremost thing is that if you are very keen in learning the DAX language, first you need to find out the learning resources. And in this webinar, I am covering all that. There is a website called Enterprise DNA. You can go to the Google and find out Enterprise DNA website. And this ultimate beginner's guide course is absolutely free of cost available, and as well as exercises are available. So I recommend that your first primary step should be that you join this course, complete this course. This course will give you a practice and developing the BI models with the DAX calculations. The next thing is that uh, if you can invest something, definitely investment pay you later on. So if you can invest approximately $349, so there is a course related to mastering of DAX, and that's very important if you want to deep dive into the data analysis expressions. So there is a website called sqlbi.com, and in this website you can enroll in the course by paying $349, and this is a course based on data analysis expressions master course. Okay, and you can also watch few free videos before enrolling that course if you find it helpful. So you can access to 157 videos and exercise files, and you can also get the certificate through it. So the next learning resource is here is that if you go to Enterprise DNA website again, so there are few paid courses are available. For example, Power BI Super Users Workshop, mastering DAX calculations. So again, that's cost $147 for you. That's mastering DAX calculation. And investing these kind of certifications always gives you an extra edge at your workplace, and definitely you can create some advanced dashboards rather than going for most of the time for the free courses. So definitely the paid courses has some different kind of advantages all the time. Um, if you use YouTube, you can go to YouTube and find out this channel Kurbal, and she's a lady. She uploads Power BI and Power DAX videos 3 times a day, and you can go to it. And there's a playlist called DAX Fridays, and there are more than 170 videos still uploaded on different kind of a DAX, and you can learn it, and you can download the exercise files as well and free of cost. So if you're a YouTube user, go to this, find out this channel, subscribe to this channel, and you will have a long playlist to learn DAX in detail. Next is Accelerator BI website. Again, this is one of the very great website in the contribution of Power BI and DAX, Power Pivots. So the link is shown here in the PowerPoint presentation. After the webinar, I will be sending you this PowerPoint presentation, and you can follow those links to enroll in free courses and the paid courses if you like. So there are a lot of courses like data modeling, learn to write DAX, and advanced topics like complex DAX concepts. So you can pursue these courses as well. So starting with the DAX language, the data analysis expression. So before going to discuss these concepts, I would like to have a small feedback from you. If you have used DAX before, kindly write yes in the chat window. If you have not used DAX before, kindly write no in the chat window. All right, so we have feedback from few of the participants. I would encourage that all participants should participate so that I have a transparent feedback from you. So few of the participants are saying we haven't used the DAX yet, and a few participants are saying yes, we have went through that. So those participants who are already using DAX will get a good kind of a resource from this webinar. And for those who have not yet started using the DAX language in Excel, Power Pivot, or Microsoft Power BI, definitely their learning curve will increase through this webinar. So stay connected, and let's discuss. The DAX language is basically a kind of, you can say, an example. So if we use functions or formulas within the Excel, for example, VLOOKUP, sum, average, count, these kind of a functions which we called in Excel. We can also write similar kind of an expressions, and for those expressions and syntaxes, we have defined a name which is called DAX, data analysis expressions. And this language is basically used to generate the analysis, generate the different kind of analysis. And we have a different kind of a categories involved. We have aggregation functions, we have date and time functions, we have the filter functions, we have logical functions, text functions, information functions. So we have a different categories, and in within respective categories we have a different kind of a list. So I know that most of the participants are belong to a very different kind of industry. For example, some of you might be working in banks, some of you might be working in manufacturing, some of you might be students. So it's depend on the industry and the business processes that how you do the analytics within your dashboards by applying the DAX language. And this is one of the most common language. This DAX language was introduced back in 2010, um, uh, quite like 10 years ago. So very few people know about this kind of a language, and now we have this language has very much modernized, and we have a lot of new functions available in the DAX language as well. So the DAX language was created specifically for the handling of data models using the formulas and expressions. So once we imported the data from multiple sources, we created a data model. For example, we created the relationships. We are done with the schemas, and now we want to apply the topmost layer of the analytics, which is called uh, which is the dashboards, and in that dashboards we need to use the DAX language. So the DAX is used in several Microsoft products such as I told you, Microsoft Power BI, Microsoft Analysis Services, and also in Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel, right? So the DAX is available in all these several Microsoft products. So DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions. Now let's come to the Power Pivot example, and DAX. All the DAX which we use in Power Pivot, Microsoft Excel, are same and similar when we use in Microsoft Power BI as well. Okay, so this is the screen. Uh, Primarily, uh, some of you who have already used Power Pivot in Microsoft Excel should be familiar with this kind of a screen where we have a different kind of data sets on one screen platform, and we used to create measures, we used to create calculated columns, and in those measures and calculated columns we apply DAX. So this is one of the familiar screen, and if you are not familiar, if you are new to it, I recommend that go and explore in Microsoft Excel Power Pivot. The instructions are all available on the internet. If you are using the earlier or previous versions like Excel 2010 or 2013, you are required to download it from the Microsoft website, which is available free of cost. If you are using the latest version, that's comes built in the professional version. Okay, so as I told you about a term which is called measure, and now again the participants which have joined us now, the purpose of this webinar is to let you know that how to get started with the DAX. So in this webinar, I am covering all the learning resources, pathways, the important concepts aligned to get you started with the DAX language. Okay, so the first term which is very important is called measure. Now, what is measure? A measure is a formula that is created specifically for use in a pivot table or pivot chart that uses Power Pivot data. So let's say measures are also two kinds. And before that, if I give you an example, how many of you create pivot tables? If you can write in the chat window, how many of you can create normal pivot tables in Microsoft Excel? Yes. So if you know normal pivot tables in Microsoft Excel, and imagine that when you select the data and you create a pivot table and you drag and drop some of the numbers field into the calculation area, automatically the sum, average, or counts started to get populated, right? So these are the measures. So these are the measures which are built in, already available, which are showing you some of the calculations. But when we have a different data sets from the different locations, when we merge them together, we create a data model. After defining the relationships, now the business needs to know the advanced analytics, and for that we need to create a formula. So for creating that analytical formula, we basically use DAX, and when we create a DAX in Power Pivot window, we called it a measure. Okay, so that Power Pivot window gives us the measures, and that measures can further in future utilize either in the Power BI windows as a measure, explicit measures, or in the Excel Power Pivot as an explicit measure. So now I have introduced a term which is called explicit. So there are two kind of measures, implicit and explicit. We will come to that, but before that, let's talk about the basics first. So the measures can be based on standard aggregation. As I told you that by default in normal pivot tables, you get some count, right? So these are the measures because on the back end, you own a formula. But when you create a formula by your own, that's called a DAX, data analysis expression. Okay. So a measure is used in the values areas of a pivot table. As we know that normally as an Excel user, we drag and drop the fields in the values areas to get the quick insights of the data with respect to sum, count, and average. So measure is similar to that. Okay. So there are two types of measures. The first one is implicit measure. The next one is the explicit measure. So what is the difference between the implicit measure or the explicit measure? So the implicit measures automatically define all the numeric columns. So the example of implicit measure can be a normal pivot table. When you just drag and drop to the values areas, you get the numeric columns calculated automatically. It can be created by default as a sum of field. If you see a normal pivot table on the top header, it shows you sum of sales, sum of revenue, sum of purchase amount. So it creates a default calculations, and it can be changed later on to the average, count, min, and max as you do in normal pivot. So by default, aggregations which are available in normal pivot tables are the implicit measures. But when the business processes analytics user need to define is called the explicit measures. So the explicit measure should have a name which is called a DAX expression. We define a name to that expression and use the complex expressions as well. It can be complex as much as you can, because if calculation is very um, long, so you need to draft a formula, a very big formula, to calculate that expression. So it can be complex. You can use it with the interaction with filter contacts. So now there is a concept also of filter contacts, a raw context and a filter context, and you need to read on normal Google blogs or the websites. You will find out that what is filter context and what is raw context. When we create a dashboards and we click on any of the objects, all the objects get filtered, right? So there is an interactivity between the DAX expressions as well. And for example, if we want to calculate the margin percentage, so we need to drive a formula, and this formula is known as the explicit measure, and we can use a DAX for that. So some of the Excel formulas like sum, average, count, min, max are also available in DAX as well. But so, let's say if we use VLOOKUP in Excel, we have to use related DAX in Power Pivot or in the Power BI. So there is few of the Excel functions are also available in DAX, but most of the times, because this language is new, and this is for the advanced analytics, so most of the DAX measures you will find very new and different. All right. So this is the example of implicit and explicit measure. All right. As you can see here on my screen, there is an image which shows you a difference between an implicit measure and an explicit measure. So implicit measure example which I gave you, that you create a normal pivot table and you just drag and drop the field into the values areas. So the by default calculation is known as the implicit measure. But we create a formula by our own. We create a complex formula, so that will be called an explicit measure, in which we will define the DAX, and that can be reused later on in our dashboards as well. Okay. So now the calculated column, and if you go to some of the very famous blogs or websites regarding the Power Pivot and Power BI on the internet, you will find a very hot debate articles regarding when to use the measures and when to use the calculated columns. So there is always a debate that when to create a calculated column and when to create a measure. Basically, most of the experts prefer to create a measures as much as you can and less calculated columns, because if your data is very large and is very highly populated, then there is a chances of speed optimization that you will find your models very slow. So if there is if there is a raw by raw calculation, you can apply the calculated column. But if you can have some DAX which already gives you the raw by raw calculation as a single output, you can use the measure instead of calculated column. So using calculated column is not a disadvantage, but we need to make sure that how large is our data as well. And in the calculated columns and in the measures, we generally apply the DAX, which called the measures. Now there is one more very good website when you will be applying the DAX. in future in Excel Power Pivot or in Microsoft Power BI, sometimes what happens is, as you have also observed in Microsoft Excel, might be one of the user in your organization has created a very complex formula, and it's a very long formula in the Excel cell, and you are unable to understand it because it is not clearly formatted. So when you create a DAX, when you create a measure, basically when you apply a DAX in a measure, when the measure becomes very complicated and complex, you need to format that in order to understand, and later on you can edit it easily. So there is a website called daxformatter.com. You can just copy your measure from your Excel Power Pivot or Microsoft Power BI, paste on this website and click on format. So when you click on format, it will give you nice and clean formatting along with the best practices, so that it should be understandable by a programmer or by a normal business user to how to edit that and what that specific measure is going. So this is another very good website to follow. So now there is an example. When you have a very complex DAX and when you copy and paste on DAX formatter, you will find when you click on the format, this website automatically format your DAX in a neat and clean format, just like a programmer writes a code, just like a programmer write SQL or any other language. This will give you indentation between the expressions and the languages, which will later on you will find easy to read about. Now the DAX operators. As an Excel user, you have also used some of the operators in your daily life, daily work routine in the data. So similarly, we have a DAX operators as well, and we need to understand each of the DAX operator and their description and the purpose as well. So when to use. So in Microsoft Excel, you might have used the ampersand sign for the text concatenation, which joins two or more than two cells or which joins two or more than two logics. In Excel, you have also used these kind of expression, which is equals to, less than and equals to, greater than. You have also used, might be used in Excel and an OR function, but in DAX you have to write something like this. So definitely there is a language difference, and because of that language difference, you need to learn these operators in order to better populate your measures and in a correct manner. Otherwise you will find errors all the time, and you have to go to the forums to find out the solution and copy and paste. So you need to learn this language fundamentally very clear, that what kind of expressions and what is the format of this language before jumping into the detailed analytics. So there are some of the DAX statements, and very few users knows about it, because most of the time what happens is, most of the times uh, DAX, we generally write DAX straightforward. We don't follow the rules. For writing the DAX, we should follow the rules, follow the standards and the procedures. As for example, as an Excel user, in Microsoft Excel, if you apply the VLOOKUP, you know that first you need to write equals to, then you need to write the name of the function, then you fill the function arguments, right? So similarly, uh, to become a smart user in data analysis expressions, you need to understand what kind of statements are available and how you can execute them later on for the advanced analytics. So the first DAX statement is called define, and I will explain each of them one by one. So the first is define, the second one is evaluate, third one is order by, the fourth one is return, and the fifth one is variables. Okay, so these are the five different DAX statements through which you can make your measures very strong, and to calculate the data correctly and accurately. So the first is DAX statement is called define. As you can see a code here, because might be the most beginners participants in this webinar might not understand what this DAX is actually doing it. But in this webinar, I'm just telling you about the DAX statements purposes, that why we need to write in this format. Okay. So the first DAX statement is called define, and if you can see that on top first line, the define word has been written. Now, why it has been written? Define keyword is a part of the evaluate syntax. So if you can see on the line number 4, there is evaluate is written. Now the evaluate has a different purpose. But first, let me explain you what is define, why the define has been came here. One define can be applied to one or more evaluate statements. Okay, and the define keyword can include definitions of query variables and query measures that are valid. So this is the purpose of the define statement. Next DAX statement is called evaluate. Now in this expression you will find the word evaluate. So the evaluate is a DAX statement that is needed to execute a query. So evaluate followed by any of the table expressions, and then in the results it gives you another table expression. So for more advanced, there are 3 terms used for it with respect to the evaluate. The first one is that evaluate can help in definition section. Number 2 for the query expressions, and number 3 for the result modifiers. So I know at this point of time you might be knowing there are some of the new terms which I have told you in the webinar, but you need to learn properly in order to get start with the DAX, because these are very important things to understand. And I will share a detailed link with you after the webinar. You can follow those links and read those articles in detail in order to how to write the DAX and the DAX statements as well. The third DAX statement is called the order, and by order we have the two conditions here. The first one is ascending and the second one is descending. But what is the purpose of order statement? The order by keyword is a part of the evaluate statement and defines the sorting order of the result produced by the evaluate. So for example, if you are doing an analysis and if you have a process and you want to order that by a brand color or a brand size, anything from ascending to descending, in your statements, in your measures, you can use the order by statement. Then you have the return statements. If you can see in this image, the word return has been associated. So the return keyword consumes variables. Okay, so might be if some of you have used VBA, Visual Basic for Applications. In Visual Basic for Application, we also define some variables, right? So similarly in DAX statements, we also define variables for the different purposes. But here the return result expression has access to all the variables. For example, here name and name two. So which is defined in the variable statements before the return. So there is a different purpose of the return result expression. And last but not the least, for the variables, so the var keyword introduce variables in an expression, and the syntax afterward defines a variable. So those were the 5 different DAX statements. Very few users know about it, because one of the mistake user do is basically they quickly write a DAX, a measure straightforward. They have no idea about the DAX statement, that how it can be very helpful by using these different 5 kind of DAX statements in the measures. Okay, so understanding it very different. Then we have different data types in the DAX. Similarly, we have different data types in Microsoft Excel. For example, in Microsoft Excel, we can write text in a cell, we can write a number in a cell, we can write Boolean values in a cell. So similarly, in the DAX, we have different data types. We have binary, 1, 0, Boolean, true and false, currency, date, time, decimal, integers, string, text strings, and the variant. So for all these data types, you need to understand, because once the data comes in from the Power Query and then it pushes to the data model, you need to understand that which kind of DAX can be applied to the different data types. Okay. So the first example here in my this webinar is the count DAX function. For example, now I am the new user. I am the very beginner user, for example, and I need to learn the DAX language. So for example, the count is available in Microsoft Excel and also now in DAX. So I'm giving you a difference. That's why I have picked a common DAX function, which is available in Excel also, so that you can understand. The first of all, the purpose of the count function is that And the category is that it's an aggregation function. It gives you some kind of a calculation, right? So how to learn DAX? First, you should need to know about the purpose. So the counts gives you the number of rows in a table where the specific column has a non-blank value. So first you learn the purpose, then you learn the syntax, that how the count would be written down in the DAX, in a measure, right? So what is the syntax of it? What will be the return value? After applying the count DAX, what will be the return value? So it tells you that it's a single integer value, returns the number of cells in a column that contains a non-blank. And then last but not the least, what will be the purpose or the remarks of this function? So the remarks of this function could be the only argument allowed to use this function is a column. And when the function finds no rows that are non-blank, it returns a blank. So the strategy of learning DAX is basically on these pillars. First, you know the function, their category, their definition, their syntaxes, their return values, and their remarks. This is how you can be very strong in learning the DAX, getting started with the DAX, which was the purpose of this webinar, to tell you that how you should take the pathway of learning the DAX language. One more example. Now here you can see in the image, we have written a measure, and simply we are doing the sum of sales amount from the sales table. But I have categorized this into the 6 different portions: A, B, C, D, E, and F, and I will tell you that each of the portion meaning. So A denotes the measure name. So first we define the measure name, which is called the total sales. The equal to sign indicates the beginning of the formula or the function, as similar to the Excel. When we need to use formula or function, we start with an equal sign, right? Then the C indicates the name of the DAX function, which is called the sum, right? And then D stands for the parenthesis, the round brackets, similar to the Excel formula and functions. E represent to the sales. The sales stands for the table name. Now table name can be different in your case. Here the sales is the table name, and F is the name of a column within the sales table, which is the sales amount, and we do some aggregation to get the sum, which is the total amount from the sales table. So this is how a DAX should be understood by a user in order to go for the advanced analytics. So sometimes people start at the very beginner level or self-learning programs because they don't invest in the paid programs or they could go for the free programs all the time. So people learn DAX, but they don't learn with a sequence and with a flow and with a proper guidance. So sometimes, as you can see in this meme, that a user has been applied filter and calculate, but he's thinking that he has done a quite few good serious things. So it can be a perception, but the purpose of this webinar is to tell you that that how you should get started by learning a DAX language, which is very important to do the advanced analytics. You should know each of the DAX, its purpose, its syntax, and its practical application with respect to the scenario or the data which you have of your organization. So there are more learning resources are available. If you are excited to learn this new language, which is called DAX, you can go to Power BI community. The link is available. You can go for YouTube channel, which is called Guy in a Cube. You can subscribe to the channel. You can go on Reddit forum and you can explore the Power BI different DAX examples from there. And also you can go for official DAX documentation. From there you can learn the detailed insights about the DAX language, and you can create a good measures in your dashboards. Okay, so let me tell you some of the examples here. So I want to refer you one website which is called the Agile Analytics, and I always found this website and this company organization work very smart, and they give the solution on BI and data analytics. So if you see on their website, what they have developed so far is that they have created some real-time dashboards to help you drive your business. And you can see that there are some healthcare insights, retail insights, finance analytics, right? So we can create these kind of dashboards, but on the back end, we have a very strong data model, and we have done a detailed data analysis expressions by creating some measures. So if you don't create measures, you can't be producing these kind of advanced dashboards. All right. So these kind of technologies are now coming in. For example, if we can demonstrate Agile Analytics website, one of the dashboard, which is, let's say, related to the healthcare. So this is the live dashboard embedded on their website, and I love to visit Agile Analytics all the time. So the dashboard will appear in next few seconds. Also, you can visit the Enterprise DNA website for more understanding and enrolling into the DAX courses. As you can see, there is one more dashboard, and with a click on a dashboard, uh, the details will change automatically. But at the back end, we need to understand that how these numbers are working, from how these numbers are fetching from the data, because they have used the DAX. Okay, and these are very important now. So you can create some advanced dashboards not by just learning the front interface of the application, but also the backend, which is called the language of DAX as well. So we have some dashboards related to profit and loss, profitability of products, right? So these are the dashboards which are available, but the conclusion is that we need to learn DAX in order to do these kind of analytics for our own organizations. Um, and as you can see that these are dashboards are live, depend on the internet connectivity. Right, so you can follow these websites after the webinar, and I've also told you a lot of learning resources in the uh, PowerPoint slide. I will share it with you, and I have also told you about the language sequence and some of the important concepts about the DAX. So I end the webinar here. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and if you have any questions, you can ask.